So, as of yesterday, Twitter has announced that it is unleashing its new weapon in the war against the harassment of women online. Not the harassment of men, of course, because, penis, so fuck them. This has been brought about largely due to the massive harassment campaign targeting women in order to silence them caused by Gamergate, by which they mean people have disagreed with feminists and they were using facts. To such an end, they have allied themselves with a feminist group, Women, Action, and the Media, or WAM. Really? WAM? Whatever. Anyways, the purpose of joining up with the George Michael's fan club is that Twitter has decided to give them a sort of super moderator status. You see, members of the group will have access to the reports filed and then will have the ability to fast-track those harassment reports through the system and can also monitor all the harassment reports that go through. Now, in case you've never heard of WAM before, you may have heard of their executive director, Jacqueline Friedman. She co-edited the book Yes Means Yes with Jessica Valenti. And yeah, you just knew Valenti would factor into this somehow. She also recently debated in favor of California's affirmative consent laws, and at one point published a piece called Unsolicited Advice for Blue Ivy Carter, which was panned heavily by black women for its racist overtones. Well, that's just perfect. So they are letting a supremacist hate group made up of the most overly sensitive and weak-minded people in history have control over their harassment claims. Because of course nothing bad will happen with that. Just look at what it did for Facebook. Oh wait. And yeah, in case you were wondering, WAM was responsible for the Facebook thing too. Now, if I were a cynical and suspicious person, I would point out that a large portion of the people who are screaming about harassment online are feminists. Feminists who usually scream harassment at anyone who voices a counter-opinion. In fact, this is how Gamergate started in the first place. Feminists and social justice warriors trying to use claims of harassment against women and misogyny as an excuse to censor other people's views and arguments. Then, the theoretical cynical me could point out that by giving these same people authority over the process of flagging harassment claims, they will then use that power to make it far easier to censor non-feminist or feminist critical opinions. If I were a cynic. Or, to use my more preferred term, someone with a functioning brain and a basic capacity for pattern recognition. The truth, according to Twitter and WAM, is that women experience a lot of harassment over the internet and they need to be protected from it. So, let me get this straight here. Women are in trouble, and we need to rush to their protection and take steps to keep them safe on their behalf. Where have I heard this before? Now, according to the article that told me about this whole plan, which you can of course find below, a recent Pew poll showed that women experience more sexual harassment and stalking than men. In fact, the article helpfully tells us that 25% of women reported sexual harassment and 26% reported stalking attempts. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't mention the percentage of men, well, that's because the article didn't see fit to mention it either. In fact, it rather omitted any male data. So, since I've always been the curious one about such glaring omissions, I dug up the study myself, which they, for some reason, didn't bother to link to. I'm sure it was just an oversight on their part. So, why didn't they mention men in that article? Well, it could be because the numbers for men were only a couple of percentile points lower than those of women. Or it could be because the other 4 types of harassment online that they looked at, offensive, violence, humiliating, or sustained, were all predominantly experienced by men. Though, except for offensive comments, they were still all within a few percentile points of one another. So the numbers are pretty much even, but this is a huge problem for women. And just to make this clear, the study lists in its introduction all manner of events of harassment in the last year or so, all of them involving women, and many of them involving feminists and women in anti-Gamergate. Which of course starts my cynical brain working again that this might be the result of some sort of collusion, But I'll leave that there as we must go on, and I'm gonna look into that later. An interesting side note, though. Even though Wham and the Justice Tards are trying to scream and gnash about how horrible being online is to women, on the survey that they themselves cite, or rather claim to be using since they didn't actually cite it in their fucking articles or on their website, the vast majority of people said that they felt the online communities were more welcoming to women than men. And when I say vast, I mean it wasn't even close in most cases. So their women-hating threat narrative doesn't seem to match up to the combined experiences of most of the human population. Which is kinda odd, because I thought that these people were all about accepting others' experiences as true. But what do I know? In fact, there were more than a few very interesting omissions in this article. This one was my particular favorite. Wham is a small non-profit outside of Boston with a staff of 2. Those 2 employees will be doing all the work. Huh. Oh well, that doesn't sound too bad, right? I mean, it's just a small group of people, nothing to be worried about, right? Only 2 of them. There aren't enough of them to really do anything significantly dangerous. Of course, if you're like me and actually stop to look at Wham's website, they actually have about 9 chapters all throughout the US and Canada, which they use to hold events and workshops, including a yearly film festival, media conferences in Los Angeles, and let's not forget how they somehow made the multi-million-dollar company of Facebook their little bitch. Pretty fucking good for a small non-profit with a staff of 2. If 2 feminists can accomplish all that, it's amazing the patriarchy is even still around. You'd think they would have taken it out in, 2 years, maybe 3 tops? Now, according to Jacqueline Friedman, the major systematic issue is Twitter, and they're not alone in this. Other social media companies do it too, doesn't put nearly enough resources into moderation. Okay, first off, feminists. It's systemic, not systematic. Why do you always make that mistake? Did none of them take basic English classes? And I know that Friedman should know better. She's a fucking degree in creative writing. Although, how she got to be why is she a feminist with a degree in... Oh, never mind. Second, she seems rather disturbingly surprised that a society that, at least in theory, allows for freedom of speech, doesn't invest a lot in moderating speech. I'm not sure if she's legitimately not very bright, dishonest, or just really does not understand the logical implications of this whole, freedom of speech thing. Because there seems to be something very wrong with her based on what I've been reading. And I mean wrong beyond the fact that she has a fucking creative writing degree. Ironically, Friedman calls this a free speech issue, though I don't quite think that she gets it. According to her, an unmoderated platform imposes its own form of censorship because it effectively prevents women from getting to speak. Even though it's a public service that anyone can use, so yeah. In simple terms, though, it's hard to get much more simple than feminist reasoning. I mean, seriously, their basic thought process is about as complex as, a ball bearing rattling around a tin can? But, in simple terms, she thinks that the fact that women experience harassment online is censorship because it makes them not want to voice their opinions. So it's that form of censorship that is, in fact, entirely not censorship. Fucking feminists! No, Friedman, this is not censorship. This is just being weak and pathetic. Men receive the same amount of harassment, you don't worry about them speaking up, because they generally don't care. The women and girls in Gamergate have been harassed constantly. By feminists, by the way, and it hasn't silenced them. Same with the women in the MRM, the Women Against Feminism, and millions of other people who speak out on issues. None of them have been silenced. If anything, it makes their voices ring louder and truer. Because those women aren't weak and pathetic. Facing harsh words is not censorship, that's life. Trying to stop people from saying the harsh words, and using your granted authority to do it, now that is censorship. Your entire position is premised on the idea that women are weak-willed and stupid, and need someone to protect them. Someone like you, apparently, who can approve what is and is not objectionable speech, and what will or will not hurt them, hurt them, upset them, or damage their precious little lady feels. Actual threats can be handled by the police. If people like Anita would ever actually report them, instead of holding them up as trophies for all to see. In fact, Twitter has a line set up just for the cops specifically. In the Pew study poll, it mentions Jessica Valenti and her so-called harassment that she got. All Valenti ever had to do was click a button, and everything that she didn't like would have been gone. Or she could have just flat out ignored them. It's the internet. You're not locked in a room with a person staring you in the face with a Norman Bates slasher smile. But for some reason, ignoring is never an option with these people. Well, we all know the reason, but these claims of harassment being a problem fall flat on their face because of this. You have a single button that makes those bad people go away if you're that kind of weak-minded human being who needs to be coddled. The thing is that the followers of Valenti could still see the tweets that were mocking and criticizing her, which is what she truly cared about. Fuck, these people have a block bot that has generated a list of over 15,000 people who are automatically blocked from them, and not because they've actually done anything to deserve it, but because most of them just happen to follow certain people on Twitter that they want to block. I'm number 601, by the way, although I probably deserve the block. But the anti-Gamergate side and other feminists block people just for disagreeing with them or arguing against feminism. I've been accused of stalking for sending 2 tweets to a feminist spaced out over 3 days. Hate speech to them is an argument that they can't rebut, and you're giving these mentally damaged morons greater authority to police others. What the fuck, Twitter? Everyone in Gamergate has been harassed and doxxed at least once by now. Some, like Milo, have had threatening packages sent to them or been swatted like King of Paul was. But these things don't make it into the assessments because they either aren't happening to women or aren't happening to the feminists and progressives who want to control the narrative. This is the exact problem that Gamergate has been trying to deal with, the bias in the media and in how these things are portrayed. As I mentioned earlier in this, all of these things that they're trying to complain about and trying to protect women from happen just as much or more so to men, but all they see is a great threat to women, even though it's really a threat to no one. If you can't even trust these people to give the truth about the underlying facts that justify these demands of theirs, can you, on any level, trust the demanded response? That's all I can take for now, but get ready, guys and girls, it's about to get real in the future. This is Alzael out. Like and subscribe, whatever. I'm gone.